contribute to the cause. And now I want to introduce our guest speakers today. So we have Nicole Lawrence as the director for both UGA Libraries Discovery and Digital Collections Department, and the Digital Library of Georgia, DLG. She works with the DLG team to facilitate digitization, access, and preservation of historical materials, including aerial photos, throughout the state. And she also guides the UGA and DLG Technology Department by working with librarians and developers to ensure access to digital resources. Sarah Causey is also here. Sarah is the interim head of the Map and Government Information Library, which houses the cartographic and government information collections of UGA libraries. And she also serves as the federal depository regional librarian for the state of Georgia and manages the repository program for Georgia State Agency publications, which includes the web archiving of state agency websites. So please give a round of applause for our guest speakers today. And I'm going to quickly change the PowerPoint, so it's going to take 2 seconds.
We all have many titles at UGA, lots of different roles. But I do want to mention that we also have Catherine Manis in the back. She's with the Digital Library of Georgia. It's her 3rd week on the job, and so she's going to be doing talks like this in the future, so she's learning with you all. So excited to have her here with us as well. You've got the clicker. Thank you. Okay, great. So we're going to talk to you all about historical aerial photos today. We'll go over a history of the collection. We'll talk about the digitization effort. Probably most importantly, if you don't know this already, is how to access it and what the plans for the future of the collection are. But I do want to start very quickly with an introduction to our organization, because I think a lot of people don't know that we exist, so I always like to give you a frame of reference for who we are. So the Digital Library of Georgia has been a long-standing organization in the state. It started in like the late 90s, actually, with the digitization and online access of government publications, and then shortly thereafter, aerial photos. And then from there grew into a website that is really just an aggregation of historical materials from all over the state. So materials that have anything to do with the history, state, people, lands. If it happened in Georgia or a Georgian was involved, we'll try to put it online if people want public access to it. A good thing to note about the Digital Library of Georgia website is that it is always freely, openly, publicly accessible. So that means no paywalls or logins for anything ever. That includes our API, so you don't have to have an API key. You are welcome to take our materials and do whatever you like with them for personal research. They may not be as easily usable for things like publications or documentaries, but we do try very hard to put a rights, like a very clearly understood rights statement on everything in the Digital Library of Georgia. It's there so that you know what your legal rights with the materials are. Most of the time, even if it's in copyright, it just means reaching out to the organization that owns it and asking if you can. And we're always happy to put people in touch with those organizations. So we have 2 primary funders. We have Galileo and UGA Libraries. Galileo is the state library consortia. Library consortia are fairly common in the US. Georgia is a little bit different in that Galileo falls under the Board of Regents and University System umbrella. So they provide resources for not just the academic libraries, but also the public library system. They also do a ton of K-12 resources. And when I say resources, I mean they provide like the bulk purchasing power for journals, databases, ebooks. They provide the technical infrastructure for our systems and servers for a lot of the library resources that everybody across the state or in the university system can access. And that is true for the stuff for DLG as well. So they provide all of our applications, our developers, and our system administrators for all of the hardware. And then UGA Libraries is our other major funder, starting with that original project for government publications in the 90s. They provide us our home, so our office, so we're right at the main library at the front of campus. So all of the technical equipment, desks, physical space, and the personnel to do the content work. So if you ever need to call us or talk to us, you're probably talking to somebody that UGA funded. So that's a brief intro to who we are. I will say that the Digital Library of Georgia has so much material, right? Started with GovDocs and aerial photos, but has expanded to have almost 300 partners at this point. So we work with academic libraries, public libraries, historical societies, churches, volunteer organizations, like anybody who holds history about the state, we will help make sure that they are preserving it and putting it online for public accessing good. So if you're doing any research, even outside of like the GIS realm about the state, I highly suggest starting there, because what's online with us is a small fraction of what our institutions hold, so we can put you in contact, and maybe they have a ton of other physical materials that you don't have access to online, but they can help you figure that out. So that's just a brief intro to us, and then I'll let Sarah talk about the collection itself.
So yeah, I'll just start by sharing a bit about our air photo collection at UGA Libraries. We maintain the largest collection of aerial photography of the state of Georgia outside of the National Archives. Due to its size and uniqueness, it's actually one of our most heavily used collections. We have coverage of all Georgia counties from the 1930s through the 1990s, although the completeness of each county does vary from year to year. The earliest photos in our collection tend to begin around 1938, but you don't start to see more comprehensive coverage until the 1950s or so, and that's just due to the availability of what was actually flown. Obviously, with that breadth of coverage, the collection is quite large. As you can see here, this is just a photo of a portion of our air photo boxes. We estimate that we have over 230,000 individual air photos and index sheets. These were produced from a variety of government agencies and private companies, of course, with the bulk of our collection coming from the USDA's Agricultural Stabilization and Conservation Service. So when I talk about this collection, those are the photos I'm usually referring to. Other creators include U.S. Geological Survey, the Tennessee Valley Authority, NASA, just to name a few. You're all familiar with these, obviously. The photos are either purchased or gifted from state agencies or other academic institutions over many decades. Throughout the majority of the collection's history, it was openly available to the public for unmediated use. However, policy dictated that a trip to the library was necessary because we didn't do on-demand scanning. It just wasn't a service we provided as the library staff. For those wishing to have digital access, there was an option. It was the Georgia Aerial Photographs Database, or GAF as we referred to it. Some of you may have used it in the past. It provided some coverage of just 47 Georgia counties. Nicole will tell you more about GAF's history now. Maybe.
There we go. Okay, so the original GAF site came online in 2005. It was a collab. This is an actual screenshot of it because it very recently was still online, which is pretty impressive. It was both a project between a vendor who did like the large indexes where it wasn't as easy in-house for us to scan and stitch all that stuff together, and then in-house in the DLG we did the actual photos themselves. And then put those together to make GAF happen. So it was a custom database application that a gentleman named Brad Baxter, who still works at the libraries and is an amazing individual, built. And interestingly enough, became the tech infrastructure that we use for most digital collections public access for Galileo and UGA libraries until like last year. We retired the last, we called it the ultimate database. So props to him for longevity in database structure. But that's how we started this. We used Mr. Sid images at the time. It was the only thing that would really allow browser-side interaction, even though it was proprietary, and we tried not to use proprietary formats. It was the only thing that would allow that browser interaction to let you like zoom in and get really close to things. The way this worked, which I think is fascinating, is that we would take the images and a bunch of metadata that we had put into XML, dump it into the database, and it would generate static HTML pages every single night. And so every single night it would refresh with static HTML, which is, I think, one of the reasons it held up, because it's a pretty like simple implementation of a public user interface. But this is what it looked like, and this is just a thumbnail of a large index. And we literally did some HTML mapping for the image, so that if you clicked on an area that happened to have a photo, you'd get popped out to that HTML page with the Mr. Sid viewer in it. yeah, it was a good enough design. It got some usage of aerial photos, but like all things, especially technology, it changes. And 15 years later, that sort of static HTML bare bones implementation of any sort of image viewer just wasn't appropriate for people's uses, right? On top of the various browser changes and changes to CSS, Mr. SIDS and their software became obsolete, and we had to find some other way to serve those images. It had absolutely no thought given to responsive design because nobody had iPhones in their hands when we designed this thing. There was no accessibility compliance, and so we had to do a major overhaul of the entire technology. So it took a good 3 years because at this point the DLG had grown far beyond aerial photos, and so we had lots of images and content to migrate to new formats and dump into new technologies. So right now we use a Postgres database with Solar Blacklight overlaid on the top for searching and indexing. And we use what's called the IIIF framework to display images. If you're not familiar, this is a thing that an image standard that libraries have adopted pretty widely over the past few years. It stands for International Image Interoperability Framework. It's not very easy to say. But it has a lot of really neat applications. One of which being we can throw incredibly high-res images onto our server. Our Mirador is the viewer we use to do this in our that's embedded in our website, and it does custom tiling on demand, so it's really low resource intensive for us and for users. You can add annotations. There's a whole bunch of image manipulation that you can do in the viewer without needing any sort of special anything. You just need a browser to open it up. And then the other really nice thing about it is libraries have adopted it because it's a standard. And so if you know how to use our IIIF API endpoint, then you know how to use any library's IIIF API endpoint. And so you can just plug and play, grab images from whoever's using the specification. And it's really easy to get images without having to go in and manually download or request file transfers or anything like that. So.
We'll just revisit GAF for a moment, because even with its shortcomings, it was as useful as it needed to be, because essentially we considered it more or less supplemental to our physical collection, especially since our main focus in McGill was creating services and support for on-site visitors. So its functionality or its lack of functionality wasn't too much of a concern. Of course, that all changed when we had to close to the public due to COVID-19, and that physical access that we relied so heavily upon suddenly became non-existent. We had to pivot and fast because those air photo requests did not stop coming in. Since we didn't have the capacity to perform that air photo research on our users' behalf, we really had to rely on GAF more than we ever had. But ultimately, we were being told that the quality just wasn't good enough to facilitate photo identification, which was the most immediate research need at the time. We were being told, resolution's too low, I can't download this. Obviously, the Mr. SID format was an issue, so our users were just stuck with that static image map, and really couldn't do much with it. Thankfully, this happened shortly after the DLG implemented those IIIF features. So obviously, with those, you could zoom, pan, download, all the things that you would expect to find in a digital viewer. So we saw this really as the opportunity to create an entirely new digital collection. And that brings us to the Georgia Aerial Photography Collection. It didn't happen quite so easily or quickly. Of course, this slide condenses about 5 years worth of work. But hopefully I've hit just the highlights here for you, so you'll have a bit more context for understanding what's available digitally if you use this collection. As I mentioned, we started this project to assist with photo identification, and we just did that by digitizing all of our indexes. Initially, our scanning priorities were based on frequency of use, and over the course of about 8 months, we scanned over 4,500 individual index sheets and created 1,273 county records in the DLG. Part of that project, probably the most time-consuming part, honestly, was it just involved stitching multiple index sheets together. So some of the indexes, as you know, come in multiple sheets. But our GIS librarian at the time took those images into Photoshop, and when she could, she created just a single county image. You won't always find that when you're using the collection. It was more difficult to do for the older ones, but I just did want to send a shout out to her. I don't know if she's online. She threatened to come today, so I did want to thank her. The collection went live in December of 2020 as the Georgia Aerial Photography Index Collection, and within a year, air photo requests accounted for over half of our reference transactions in McGill. As that number continued to grow, we adjusted our policies to accommodate a digital-first service model and created online tools to facilitate requests. Although ultimately we found that we just didn't have the capacity to continually mediate access to those photos. The obvious solution is to expand the digital index collection to include those individual photos, which is a lot easier said than done for a collection this size, of course. Luckily, we weren't starting from scratch. We had about 47,000 digital images that we were planning to reuse from the GAF site. The reuse of these files actually reset our previous priority list, and we shifted to focus more on the completeness of digitization for any individual county. And when those were all uploaded, we then switched to the completeness of any individual year within a county. So that's why when you're in there, an entire county may not all be digitized at the same time. A major component of that work was an inventory of our digital holdings to identify gaps, which McGill's staff and student assistants have been working to digitize. Since 2023, we have digitized over 25,000 photographs in-house. The inventory also helped us identify photos that can be purchased from the USDA, which we submitted that order earlier this year, and it should result in about 23 terabytes of images. And again, this is all just historical aerial imagery. There are many more years left to digitize, and that's where staff in the DLG have come in to offer their crucial support. Starting in October of last year, they joined our digitization effort, and Nicole will tell you more about the work they've been doing.
Yeah. So Sarah and her team of students continue to scan things that they can handle down in the sub-basement where they're located, and then we also bring a selection of photos up to the 7th floor in the main library to work in our lab to do digitization. So her students do things like prepping the images, erasing crayon marks, like making sure that the images are good enough to be displayed online, and then they have a bunch of flatbed scanners that they'll sit and run the actual photos through to capture the images. So up in the DLG, we on the right-hand side, this is one of our image techs, Joanna. We actually have this overhead camera set up. It's super modular, so we can adjust the lighting and make sure we're getting a good quality capture. But we've actually replaced all of our flatbed scanners with this because we found it was much quicker to capture this way. She's got a foot pedal underneath her, so she can just slap a photo down, hit the foot pedal, and move on to the next one. And it's remarkably fast for us to capture images this way. Although, what I do want to note is what she's doing there is taking the teeny tiniest little magnets and like putting the edges of the photo down so you get a flat image. No matter how the images are captured, Sarah's team creates the metadata, hands it over to us. We ingest that into our system. So we do preserve high-res TIFF files, and then we put JP2s on for online access in our IIIF viewer, so it gets loaded in there and it's ready for public consumption.
So just because how technology is set up, I can't do a live demo. How many of you have actually used this collection? Anyone? Great. That's awesome. So on the left is just the landing page. If you go in the Digital Library of Georgia, if you don't have the URL at the top, you don't remember how to get there, just get to the DLG and then explore collections. Just type in aerial photographs and it'll come up. Essentially, it just sorts by relevance. What we tell people to do, and you can't really see it here, is just go to the refined search options on the left and search by Georgia County. And if you just select the county you're looking for, it'll give you everything that is digitized for that county. And there, like I mentioned, not all photos are digitized yet, but there will be a result for the index if we have it in our collection at the very least. And then on the right is just an example of a record. Once you click on, this is Clark County, 1980. The display in the middle, like I said, you could zoom, you can pan. You can open that result in a full screen. You can download this image or any of the images included. And the full size image is a download option. Also, I want to point out that on the left, I have toggled a sidebar and then clicked on an index icon. And this actually provides a text list of all of those photos included. So I find this is much more easier to navigate than trying to page through all of those photos or to use the scroll bar to highlight it. Just open that, and it's really simple. Below here, not captured, is just all the metadata. So that's, county name, year, number of photos included, a description of what you're seeing. And I just want to mention the metadata because some of it is not up to date. We have prioritized adding the photos over updating the metadata. It's easier for, I think, DLG staff to ingest all the corrected metadata at once. So you'll just find some inconsistencies there, and we do apologize for that. Hopefully it's not terribly confusing for you. The other thing,
I'm going to interrupt for 1 second
Yeah.
and say one thing I want to note is that our file naming is incredibly regular and has a very predictable pattern. So if you are looking for a particular county or year, you don't want to use the user interface, you want to do it programmatically, it's really easy to figure out what you're looking for and just sort of ping the API button.
So also what I've included here is just our air photo libguide. It is the aerial photography and remote sensed imagery. The URL again is at the top. If you don't take a picture or write it down, you can always just go to UJ Library's main webpage, type in air photos in the search bar, and it's going to be one of the top results. So there are 3 tabs included here. The first tab basically is what we call the home tab. It includes all of the instructions for accessing this collection. So it includes our air photo use policies. It includes a link to the request form, which is online. So obviously, there may be photos you need that are not yet available digitally, but we will scan those for you. You just have to submit a request. We do ask that you limit it to 5 locations a day, but we can certainly work with you if you have more than that. Otherwise, if you want to come in person and use our air photo collection, that is still a possibility. Since we went digital, we have moved our photos to closed stacks, so they're no longer publicly accessible if you just drop in. But you can still use them. We just ask that you email us, make an appointment. That way we guarantee someone's on site to pull those photos for you. And if you do have requests or looking for something online, the third tab is our inventory, or an attempt at an inventory. It includes a legend, so for the codes included with each year. It's not a complete collection. So we try to break it down by what we actually have. So options are, digital available, digital only, index only available. So you can go here if you're wondering if we even have photos at all for our collection. One neat thing I will say about this is if it is fully digitized, then we have hyperlinked the name in the list. So you can always go there first if you don't want to just page through and sort of guess. Hopefully that's useful. Finally, next steps. We are digitizing more photos. We'll be digitizing photos for the foreseeable future. We also have a 1988 NAP set. So because it's a statewide set, we've had the digital files for a while. We just didn't know how to organize them well within the collection, or if we wanted to create an entirely new collection. Ultimately, we decided we didn't want to complicate by adding yet another collection for people to sort of have to search out. So we had our GIS librarian just map the file numbers to the counties they show, and we'll just organize them that way. Hopefully we'll have that up sometime this summer. And then we're anticipating those USDA purchases, hopefully by the end of the year. It's a federal agency. There's only one person working in that office. I'm sure this is all very familiar to you. And also when we submitted our order, he said they had a hardware failure, unfortunately. So fingers crossed we'll get those. But yeah, it's a lot of images, and I'm sort of anticipating the question, what are they? The office that has digitized those, they tend to do 1950s, 60s, and 70s. So if it's missing and it's in that range of years, we're probably just waiting on the purchases rather than doing it ourselves. And then finally, Megan Duver is working on improving access with just interactive indexes. Like this one in the front is just of Clark County. So she's using georeference photos to just build this out so that users, instead of having to go through and research each individual index, they can just type in the address and it'll tell them all the photos they need for each year that is added as that layer. You probably all know more about this project than I do, or if you have questions about it, please send them to her. But I am happy to take any other questions.
Yeah, and I'll also add, Sarah made it sound like this is going to be a really long-standing project for us to digitize all this stuff, but between the two departments, we get about 70,000 images online a year, and I think by the end of next year, we'll have everything online. So, well, with the exception of what the National Archives gets to.
I got just one question, just comment. Just want to thank y'all for doing it because we use the heck out of those imagery sets for a lot of historical stuff we have to research. But just want to make sure I'm doing something right. So the indexes y'all show for the image sets, they're geo-referenced in, but when you download the high-res imagery, those have to be geo-referenced by us.
Yep.
That's what we've been doing. I just
Yep.
want to make sure I'm not doing it wrong because I got somebody that's been working on it.
Yeah. Yeah, oh good.
I know there's a georeference one already. I'm like, oh gosh.
So we had graduate students for a while georeferencing our photos. They stopped with, I mean, it's mostly Clark County and surrounding counties. So
There's just, I don't
Yeah.
see no way y'all could do it. It would just be,
it was like an experiential learning project. And then when Megan was moved out of McGill and into research and computational data management, that sort of fell apart. So yes, you're doing the right thing, and we know how much work it is to do.
Tyler, does anybody have questions?
Not right now. We have 35 people logged in.
Great.
I did say the questions in chat they had any.
I have a question. Well, I guess first a comment. Thank you for the historical photos. Athens, Clark County, we used that data, I think from 38 onwards to create a legacy forest map to show us where oldest forests are here. So I use it pretty regularly as the forester. But is it, so there's the digital archive that's all old photos, right? There's also the newspaper archive, and they're all kind of the same backbone, right? Like the same organization in terms of the website.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Well, so for the digital photos, is there any way to request a rescan on some of those photos? Because I found some of them are sort of blurry or have
Yeah.
issues. Is that feasible, or what, do I have to wait another year?
No. Shoot us an email. You can even just put in like follow the online request form, and we're happy to rescan those for you. Yeah, a lot of those just came from that like GAF backlog, and we did attempted to do quality assurance on those images before we reused them. But I'm guessing some things were missed, but also there's some things like bit rot and things that happen with sort of the images over time that we might not have caught. So.
Do y'all have the physical photos? Like most of the ones that I'm using for the tree domes itself are Atlanta Journal-Constitution photos. So do you have those in physical form, or would the HAC probably have those in their archives?
So you're talking about not an aerial photo, just like an actual photograph.
Yeah, just old photos.
Yeah, if it's in the AGC collection, it's something that they physically house. They work with Georgia State for that online access that's in our collection. So Georgia State might actually have those on premises instead of somewhere in the AGC buildings. So we do manage the DLG and sort of the cultural heritage and natural heritage and the newspapers. The DLG content gets a little bit more wily because we don't own any of the materials. We happen to be in the same building as Sarah, so we can rescan an aerial photo if we need to. But if it's something from Georgia State or one of our public libraries, we're happy to reach out to them and see if they can rescan anything or have a higher res or a different version of things.
Thank you.
have any imagery, no. But as the depository for federal government publications, we do have like some maps and things, but no imagery.
I know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I would try the National Archives.
We did have a question come through. Jim Carmichael asked, if we in local government download these older images tiles and georeference them ourselves, are we permitted to use them in our internal and external viewers so the public would be able to see, or is it for internal use only?
No, so these, because they're considered federal publications, there's no copyright. So yeah, it's public domain. These certainly can be reused.